Hi, and welcome to Affected, a podcast from Meet. For those of you who don't know Meet, we are a global life sciences talent provider. We've been connecting the industry for over a decade, and now we want to share some of our insights and experiences with you. We'll be hosting monthly episodes, sharing thoughts from our leaders and industry professionals about job hunting and hiring in life sciences, as well as giving our network a platform to share their own experiences of building successful careers in an industry that affects us all.
Hey guys, and welcome to Affected, a podcast hosted by us here at Meet. And today we're talking about data and analytics and feedback and how we can use them to better inform us during our hiring process and how we can use those things most effectively. If we look at the market and the economy as a whole right now, it's kind of obvious that we're going through this period of change and adaptation. And in these kind of tricky markets, it's best to equip yourself with the best tools possible to succeed. And it's not like the world of life sciences isn't already using data and analytics. It just feels as if they're not using it in attracting the best talent, retaining that talent. So today I'm joined by Callum McGuire and Miina Mcintyre. Could you guys just give the people listening a little insight into who you are and what you guys do here?
Yeah, so I'm the data analyst here at Meet, and so my role is to really look into each stage of the hiring process and seeing how we can optimize that better and have a look at with the companies that we work with and the people that we work with looking for jobs, how we can really make that our recruiters' lives easier along the way.
And I'm Miina. So me and Callum work very closely together. I head up our success function, so I look at sort of gathering feedback from everyone that we work with at all stages of the process. But alongside Callum, we look into sort of various data points, doing some kind of analysis in terms of external factors, the things that we've done here at Meet, the feedback that we get from people we work with, and how we can best use that to improve processes across the business.
So, jumping straight in, Callum, I love to talk about data. What are the things that you would look for right now if you were looking to build out your team?
So I think as a company, the most important thing, or one of the important things to building out a team is really keeping an eye on what's going on in the world right now, because what happens around us every day, sort of in the general news, is what will dictate what happens in our industry as life sciences, because it does, as we say here, it does affect us all. Like, life sciences is integral to how we live. And so I think being really clued up on what is going on in the world and how that could potentially affect this industry, that is really important for dictating what your team could be looking like next. Internally, sort of looking around as a company, keep an eye on your competitors. I think that's another really key piece to have a look at. So what areas they're building out, where are their drug developments going, what fundings they're getting. This is all available to them. And so really keeping an eye on who you're trying to compete with, that will keep you at the top of the market. Yeah,
sort of like acquisitions and things like that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's like recently there was a deal between BMS and Celgene, and that was like, I think it was like $14 billion. That will create lots of opportunities, and that is the kind of thing that will dictate where a company is going to go next in the future.
And that kind of information is so readily available. It's just a case of taking that information and then drilling down to the next step and sort of really working out what we can use that information for and help us in our, building out our talent pools from that, right?
So yeah, off the back of that merger that we talked about, there will be a lot of changes internally at that company or at those companies, and so that will have a big ripple effect across the rest of the industry, which will enable other companies to potentially get in on feel the effects too of what was happening there.
I guess even on a macro level, like the world at large affects the market, right?
Yeah, 100%. So the biggest example recently is COVID. It's like that was huge for the world of life sciences. It really changed our perception on how much we care about health, and so that the market absolutely rocketed at that point. So many opportunities, so much chance to upskill. Even if you weren't hugely affiliated with the area before, if you had a partial interest, there was so much to go around at that point. And so that is a huge, hopefully not going to happen again, but that's an example of something in the world that will affect how you can look at jobs, and from a company's perspective, how you can target people.
I guess the natural follow-up to that would be, how can we use data as a job seeker when we're looking for our next role? Because we don't all have like a math whiz at home that we can lean on. We haven't got all this incredible data analysis software on our computers at home. So what can we do as job seekers to make that search a little easier on ourselves?
100%. So similar to how companies can approach the hiring process really is keeping your ears to the ground about what's going on in the world and how that will affect the life sciences industry, and in particular the areas that you're interested in going into. That is crucial because what goes on around us and then is what then affects what happens in life sciences. I think being able to dig down, because also there's so many things that will give you information about deals, but you don't need all the tools that I have. There's so many free, ready to use ones that I've used before when I was just a student. It's like you don't need to have the more specific stuff. So like Bloomberg, Yahoo, all the other more specific life sciences one, they'll give you all the information on deals going down. They'll give you information on what drugs are in process, what areas are really interesting right now. And I think that getting clued up on that as a job seeker is really important, and that will give you a great step ahead in the hiring process that most people won't have. Because even if it just leads you to go into interviews, you'll have something to talk about, which not everyone will have. And I think it's really important.
Yeah, definitely. I think even talking about not just life sciences itself, but looking for a job in general, there's so many tools that you can utilize that are kind of at your fingertips, like LinkedIn. And I think looking into sort of the companies that you want to work at, they've just released a new feature on LinkedIn actually where you can show your interest in working at a company that you want to work at. So when they release new jobs, you're the first on their list. Looking at the kind of people that they employ and going onto their profiles and seeing what kind of skills they have, hugely beneficial for then you being able to upskill yourself, looking at the kinds of things that those companies are looking for, or even just don't be afraid to reach out to people who do work there or ex-employees and actually bridge that connection there yourself. I think there's kind of very soft things that you can do to get a deeper understanding of the company that will then really help you with your search and to just kind of make that a bit more efficient.
Right, off the back of that, so I remember when I was looking for jobs before, I remember I just messaged a random sort of senior person in a field I wanted to go in on LinkedIn, and I had never met them. They were off in Stoke or something, and they just messaged me back, being like, "Oh yeah, sorry, I didn't see this for a while, but here's a bunch of things of how I got into this position." So yeah, as you're saying, it's like such a great opportunity on LinkedIn to be able to upskill and find out what your industry wants.
Yeah, and putting yourself at the top of that demand list. If you know exactly what skills that company is hiring for or what skills a certain role requires, not just from the job description, but from people who already work there, then you've already got a model of what that employee looks like, and that's what you can then model yourself off.
Yeah, I guess you can't really put an emphasis on how important it is to be connected to the people within the markets that you're working in, right? It's about building those connections and sort of getting those pathways into those companies that you could potentially be working for. I think another thing that we could talk about here is sort of just how much the world at large affects the markets that we are working in. Can we speak on that at all?
Yeah, of course. Well, I mean, the easiest one, 100%, is COVID. It's what's happened recently. Everyone in the world has been affected by COVID, and we in life sciences have felt it a lot. Even those of us who didn't really care about or didn't think about health and life at large as like how much it affects and interjects. COVID changed all that, and that created so many opportunities in life sciences, so much drug development, so much accelerated process, and not just at like the CRA level, at like the wider life sciences industry as a whole. So many opportunities, and so much business was made off the back of that, and that shows just how keeping up to date with what's happening in the world can have a big impact on what you know about your industry here in life sciences.
I guess COVID was such a monumental event. It sort of like affected us all in massive ways. I'm sure like it wasn't just life sciences that were affected in that regard. It's so important to keep an eye on those external factors, those factors that we don't really have any control over. But there are internal factors that we can look at as well. And I think one of those things is we talked about it briefly earlier, and building those connections is using feedback as a data point, right? How could I, as a pharmaceutical company, use feedback and broader insights to find the perfect person for the roles that I'm hiring for?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about already how sort of turbulent and different. There's been a lot of change in the last few years, and so that has made the market competitive as well. And so in a competitive market, as somebody looking to build out your team, you need to understand what job seekers are looking for and really understand what people want from their next role. And I think just getting to grips with what people think about not just you as a company, but your process is really beneficial. And so gathering feedback at all stages of the process of hiring just allows you to really identify what it is that the people that you're hiring are looking for and where you're doing well and how you're selling. There's an attraction element to it. It's, are job seekers going to go online and read something about your business that they think is good and that makes them want to work there, or are they going to hear things that they didn't like and it makes them not want to work there? Yeah, are people going to say positive things about you? We have platforms such as Glassdoor where employees can review what it's like to work at a company. And so starting from that very base level, you want to provide a great experience for the people that you work with so that they're going to say good things about you. If they're going to say constructive things about you, then it's best to be on top of the game and respond to those things and mitigate any kind of further damage that may cause your reputation. And so then from an attraction perspective, gathering feedback and getting a lot of positive feedback that's available externally is going to make people want to work with you. But more than that, process improvement can also be hugely benefited by feedback, because if you're able to understand what it is that people like about your company, or what it is that people like about interviewing with you, or if people came in to interview and 5 people came to interview with somebody in your company and they all left saying the same thing, they didn't understand the job when they left, for example, then that's a really immediate change that you can make straight away to ensure that doesn't happen in your next interview. You don't want to be losing talent for minor things that could be avoided, and so gathering feedback at sort of all stages of the process is really helpful to make sure that you're avoiding any unnecessary kind of problems. So for example, if you're interviewing 5 people, you've interviewed 5 people for the same job, you're getting the same feedback over and over again. They've left the job and they don't really understand the job description, just for example. That's where you can then mitigate that straight away. You know what you can do for the next interview to stop that from happening, and it just makes it much easier to avoid unnecessary problems where you're losing talent for silly things that could be avoided.
Yeah, I think it's really important to understand that every interaction you have during the hiring process is an opportunity to showcase exactly who you are as a business, right? I think the statistic is 60% of people who are looking for jobs, who are going through that process, actually have a negative experience. And, they'll go on, 72% of those people then go on to, tell a family member or a friend about that experience. And if you go to a bad restaurant, the first thing you do is you speak about it, right? What I find even more interesting is 70% of businesses don't actually provide a platform to the people they're hiring to bring feedback in so that they can utilize that information. What would you say to those companies? What are the few of the things that they can do to sort of, get a level up and step up in the way that they can bring that feedback back on board?
Yeah, absolutely what you said. If you think about watching a film, the first thing you're going to do is go online and look for a review. And the same thing applies to the job seeking process. I myself know that I do it when I'm looking for a new role, or when I'm doing anything. The first thing you do is you go and you log on and you want to see what people have said about that business. So if you're a company and you are looking to bring on new talent, I think invest in a feedback platform if you can. If you can't, work with someone like me. We have the facilities and the platforms and the infrastructure to gather feedback, as I said, at every stage of the process. So not only are we able to get feedback on what people think of your business and the process itself and, mitigate those things as and when they come, but we can also give you feedback on what the general job-seeking population think as well, and give you guidance and insight on what kinds of things are coming up commonly across different companies as well, and your competitors, and give you that kind of broader comparison across the industry. So my advice would be invest in a feedback platform if you can. That would be my first and main piece of advice. I think we already know how valuable that would be, but failing that, work with a company like Meet. Meet have the facilities and the infrastructure to gather feedback at every stage. Like I've touched on before, we ask that question at every stage in the process to make sure that we're identifying what's happening throughout the hiring process. So not only can we provide insights to your company on what people think of you and your hiring process, but also on the wider industry itself. We work with so many companies and so many people who are looking for jobs that we know what's most important to the people in that job force. And so, just come to us and ask us for some insight, and we'll definitely be able to provide it, if not direct feedback on your company itself.
Yeah, I'd say off the back of that is like, you use the example of if you go see if you want looking for a film and you see bad reviews, you'll go see it. It's like, well, even if you go see you can risk like a semi-bad film, because like that's only 2 hours of your life. So if you're signing up for a job which has bad reviews, there's like that, who knows how long that could be. So people are going to be so much more cautious, which makes feedback that much more important on your overall hiring process.
Absolutely, and if you get that feedback at the interview stage before you've actually made that hire, then at least you're avoiding unnecessary hiring costs on someone who's then going to quit 3 months later. Like, you're just putting so many more mitigations in place to avoid any issues.
Yeah, and I guess it's not just sort of like using feedback in terms of a skills search, right? Being better informed about like a cultural ad, finding the right people for your company, whether our values align, whether our ethoses align. Like you were saying, you're going to be with the company for hopefully more than 2.5 hours, right? And finding that right person who actually can sort of add to your business on all levels, not just from a talent perspective. I guess finally, Miina, what would you say to me as someone in the job market looking for a new opportunity? How could I use feedback? What platforms are there for me to sort of gather that information and better inform my decisions as I move forward along the process?
Yeah, I mean, I think we talk about it a lot when we're talking about from a hiring perspective. There is a lot of feedback that you can gain from looking online, like Glassdoor, looking at the employees who work there already and what they think and how they feel about working there. That's an obvious one to go to at the very beginning stage. I mean, I think we talked briefly before about LinkedIn, so use LinkedIn kind of in the ways that we said. LinkedIn is a hugely useful platform for making connections and for gathering that information. Glassdoor is a very, very helpful tool if you want to know what it's like to work at a company. Employees are quite likely to leave a review on Glassdoor about what it's like to work somewhere, and chances are they're more likely to leave a review when it's negative as well, so you're more likely to get that understanding of those companies like that. And then I think as well, just like using a talent provider, if you have access to using a talent provider and speaking with a recruiter to get a new job, they're going to be able to give you a much deeper understanding into what other candidates feel about that company, what other candidates have felt going through the hiring process with them. And so they can tell you what came up in the interview, what the interviewer was like, what kind of personality traits they had, what kind of things you might want to mention when you're speaking to them, just to give you that kind of better preparation for going into those events. And I think that's a really useful tool to have. And if you don't have access to a recruiter, or if you are doing it yourself, another thing that's really, really important is just taking feedback on board. Don't be afraid to ask for feedback when you're interviewing, when you're liaising with a hiring manager. Understanding what they felt about you is just as important. If you can find out the things that you did well and the things that you didn't do so well, you're going to be so much more equipped for your next interview or for the next stage of the process. So just don't be afraid to ask for feedback everywhere you go, and to seek it out, because the more you know, the more prepared you can be.
Yeah, there's no such thing as too much information, right?
No, exactly.
It can only be a benefit to us to know as much as possible, and how we can sort of tailor ourselves in the correct way. I mean, a company might not be the right fit for us, and that's fine too. You don't want to be in a situation where you end up in the wrong place. Finally, if we could give our listeners 2 final takeaways, 2 just golden pieces of advice that they could go away with and use out there during their job search or when they're building out their teams, what would those 2 bits of advice be? What would those 2 takeaways be?
So being in touch with what the world news is, and being really keyed in on what's going on in the world and in that industry in particular, because it's applicable to all sectors really, no matter where you are. But in life sciences, I'd say really recommend is keeping up to date with deals, mergers, acquisition. That will dictate the funding, and that will dictate where the job opportunity is going to be. And also on a more specific basis, if you really like certain companies that you want to work with, follow them on LinkedIn, follow them on other platforms that they have, keep in touch with their news, because that's going to make they're going to want to employ you, because they're going to see your enthusiasm and it's going to come through, especially if you do that, because the majority of people do not do that kind of stuff. And so you're going to come across really well, and it's going to be a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, I guess mine would be, don't be afraid of feedback. I mean, feedback can be so constructive and so positive, and from an attraction point of view, as well as a kind of improvement process point of view, there's so many benefits to feedback.
And while we're on the subject of feedback, your feedback is so incredibly important to us. We want this podcast to be a place where you can come and keep your fingers on the pulse of what's happening in life sciences. So please get in touch with us. We want to hear about the topics that you would like us to cover. What kind of things interest you right now? This is such a dynamic market. Things are always changing. New things are always cropping up. And if we can be a place where we can help just give you that kind of information, that would be fantastic. I'd like to say thanks to you guys. I know this isn't something that you'd normally be doing in a regular 9 to 5 working day, but I really appreciate it. And of course, thanks to you guys for listening.